Welcome back, Omnibuds. My name's Kevin, and today is day 2 of my review of the JMS Amazing Spider-Man run. I just finished a reread of Omnibus Volume 2. I can't wait to talk about it. Grab your cup of coffee, and let's check out this book. All right, here we have it. This is Amazing Spider-Man by J. Michael Straczynski, Volume 2, the end of his run. Let's get a look at the back of the book. So really, and I'll kind of describe this as I go along, this book can really be broken down into 4 parts. It starts off kind of continuing where Peter was at the end of Volume 1. He's now he's a new Avenger. So you get to see him interact with the new Avengers team. Then we get into the story called The Other, which is, or Evolve or Die is kind of the subtitle. And you get to see the continuation of that Moreland character that we saw in Volume 1 and that exploration of the spider totem and the questions that JMS asked, like what came first, the spider or the powers, or why did the spider choose Peter? You know, really questions that hadn't been asked of Spider-Man lore. Then we get into Civil War stuff. There's some Road to Civil War, then the Civil War crossovers. And then we get to the Civil War fallout, which is Back in Black and One More Day. But let's take this dust jacket off because we are not animals here at the cafe, and we'll take a look. All right, so we get this cool wraparound cover showing Peter and Spider-Man, Mary Jane Watson Parker Watson, and Aunt May. But let's dig into this. So we get some really cool art in this. A lot of it was done by Mike Deodato Jr. From Brazil. We get some flashbacks covered by Mark Brooks. We get a little Mike Wieringo on the Friendly Neighborhood stuff. Some early Tyler Kirkham stuff, and some Ron Garney. And at the end, we get Joe Quesada, who I'm a huge Quesada art fan. Let's dig into this. So like I said, we start off this story kind of just picking up where we left off with Volume 1. Peter is now an Avenger. He's still working at his old high school. And this new character shows up who I don't recall if we've ever met in the past, and I forget his name. I'll throw it up there. But he's he went to school with Peter, and he's kind of this fellow nerd geek who had a lot of the same problems that Peter had in high school growing up. But he grows up to be a scientist, and he's working on this project, and he needs Peter's help. He's developing something for the military, this kind of skin suit made out of some concoction of vibranium. Well, it's a really cool story in that it shows that, you know, Peter and this character both kind of grew up with, you know, being bullied in school because they were nerds. And it shows the 2 routes that these characters took. I think in this issue, or in the subsequent issues, we get some of the best flashbacks to Ben Parker, Uncle Ben. Some really cool stuff in there. But this is a 6-part issue, and it just shows Spider-Man kind of trying to help this character who's gone the way of, you know, the villain pretty much, and has made some bad decisions. As we move along, we see, you know, something happens at the end of this run with Aunt May's house that Peter grew up in, and this character blows it up. And they're kind of on the outs. They don't know where to go. And so Peter, now being an Avenger, is asked to move into Tony Stark's tower and live with the rest of the Avengers. And this is really cool stuff because we get to see Aunt May meet Jarvis. There's a kind of a little romanced thing going on there. And we get to see Mary Jane a little bit closer to Peter's, you know, second life. So in this second arc, something happens and Peter has to do some detective work. There's this Hydra group that's kind of resurfaced and is doing some things. They cloned some heroes, or they created their own version of past Avengers and are using them to attack the new Avengers. Well, Peter's got ideas, but the Avengers are really busy, so he kind of goes off on his own and does some detective work, even though Tony Stark and Captain America are a little hesitant to believe Peter. But this issue or this storyline does a really good job at kind of making the new Avengers really trust Peter Parker as a member of the team. Here's some of these characters that are, I don't remember if they were cloned or if they were just kind of made to look like Thor, made to look like Captain America and Iron Man. So then we get this story, and this is kind of leading into, I think this is the early parts of the other, I don't know if I'm going to find the story, but something's going on with Peter. There's something that happened in the first book. He's not feeling well. He's getting dizzy. His powers aren't reacting how they're supposed to. And he gets shot by this character called, I don't know, I forget. I've got a terrible memory, even though I just read this. His name's Bullets or something, or Bend or something stupid. But we get the return of Moreland, who was presumed dead in the first omnibus. And this villain was newly created by JMS. He's kind of this vampire-esque character who hungers after people like Peter Parker or Ezekiel, who we met in the first run, who have this spider power. So like I said, Peter's not feeling the greatest. He feels like something's going on. He's constantly tired and just does not know what's going on with his body. So he, along with the rest of the Avengers, seek out some medical help from those in the hero community. So the other, Evolve or Die, was a 12-part story. I really liked it overall. JMS brought in the people who were writing Peter Parker Spider-Man, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and at the time there was a Marvel Knight Spider-Man. So Peter goes and gets checked out by a few Avengers or a few heroes in the community, scientists, and they can't isolate what's going on with him. They go to Reed Richards. He performs some tests. They find the Hulk out in, I think, Nevada or something like that, and they are successful in converting him back to Bruce Banner, who does some work, and they can't figure out what's going on. So they bring him back to Wakanda, and we go back to this spider temple, which we saw in the first run. But what we learn is that the belief is that Peter's dying, and they don't know why. So part of this story is, like I said, continuation of that first run in the first omnibus, where this Moreland character is trying to feed on the blood of Peter so that he can survive. He can feed on the blood of regular humans, but Peter's blood is what's really going to sustain his life. Here we get this awesome Mike Deodato Jr. cover. I think this is gorgeous, absolutely awesome. But if you recall, the battle between Spider-Man and Moreland in the first one brought Peter nearly to death. And, we're going to see some of the same thing here. Moreland's a very strong character, and this is a pretty gruesome story as well. I'll try not to give away too much of it, but in this fight, here's a great image of the end of the fight. Peter is near death, and I think it was the Iron Man or someone break into the hospital and help him escape or get him to a better hospital, and they're trying to save his life. But as he's in this hospital, presumably dying, Moreland shows up and is ready for that final feast. And who attempts to save the day? His wife, Mary Jane Watson Parker. And I'm going to try to skip a few issues here because I don't want to give away the imagery because it's really cool. But Peter dies. Spider-Man dies in this story. Spoiler alert, it's 20 years old. But it won't last for long. We explore more of that spider totem and some of the powers that Spider-Man has never really knew he had, right? He knew that he was strong, that he could jump, that he could stick to walls. He had this spider sense, but there's other spider abilities that he didn't know he had. And some of these come out. And one of them is, again, slight spoiler alert. So if you mute me if you haven't read this, but some spiders can, at death, shed their skin and grow a new body. I don't know if that's true, but it happened in the comics. But that's exactly what happens. So Peter's not dead for long. He comes back to life, and he comes back to life with like he had just gotten his powers. His scars from old battles are gone. He's got these new spider abilities, and we just get to see Peter live. And so the end of this, the other story, the other Evolve or Die, shows Peter kind of trying to figure out what exactly happened to him. So as this one comes to a close, the other, again, I don't want to give away too much. We go right into Road to Civil War. So Peter Parker goes to Washington. So throughout Peter's time as a new Avenger, which is relatively new, he's grown really close to Tony Stark. They both got scientific minds. Peter sees Tony as kind of like this father figure. And if you've read Civil War, you probably know that the Road to Civil War stuff is absolutely must-read stuff. You have to read this to understand how we got to the point where there is this, what do they call it? Superhero Registration Act, and how Tony eventually talks Peter into unmasking. Then I think there's 3 issues of this kind of Road to Civil War stuff. Then we get into the actual Civil War crossover stuff. Yeah, 3 issues. And I don't know if they're ever going to give us a Civil War omnibus, but if they do, I think the Road to trade paperback will be in there, and that's got a lot of these Spider-Man issues. It's got some Fantastic Four issues and then some Illuminati stuff, and that will absolutely be in there. They'd be silly not to do that. But I also make the argument that the Spider-Man issues, the crossover issues that happened during Civil War, are incredibly important to understanding the context of Civil War. So if you ever read Civil War, find a reading order and don't read everything that reading order tells you to read. I would definitely recommend reading the Amazing Spider-Man stuff in between issues of Civil War. Probably also the Iron Man stuff, New Avengers, and maybe Fantastic Four. But you 100% have to read the Spider-Man issues kind of interspersed between the Civil War. And we just get more context, right? If you've read Civil War, you know what happens. Peter unmasks at Tony's request, saying this is the right thing to do. Register, we'll protect Aunt May and Mary Jane and your friends. And really the reasons you've kept your identity secret all these years. And then things start to happen where he starts disagreeing with what Iron Man and this 50-state initiative people are doing. And Spider-Man switches sides. Spider-Man's kind of the heartbeat of Civil War. Tony Stark is probably the brains. But that's why I say you absolutely have to read the Spider-Man stuff in between. So I'll throw it up here somewhere, but I recently reviewed Civil War if you want to go check that out. But there's some significant fallout from Civil War. And, one of the things that myself and other comic book fans complain of constantly is that these big events have no lasting impact. Well, Civil War had considerable lasting impact. After issue, I think it was 6 or 7 issues long, at the end of Civil War, you immediately have to go read what happens to Captain America, and then you immediately then have to go and read what happens to Spider-Man. So we'll get into, I guess this is the last. No, we've got a few. I'll skip ahead. This panel right here, I'm going to just freeze on so you can maybe read this word bubble here, but this is one of the greatest splash pages, I think, of all time. It's just Captain America talking to Peter Parker about, following your gut, sticking to your morals and your beliefs, regardless of what the rest of the world says. And that's really Captain America's stance on Civil War as a whole and why he decided to be on the non-registration side. So this last issue will kind of lead you into the next issues of Amazing Spider-Man, which is called Back in Black. And whoops, spoiler, Aunt May gets shot. So Aunt May is shot, and really the reason is because Peter's recently unmasked himself. So now all these bad guys know exactly who he is, where his family is, where they live, and everything that Peter's done throughout his entire career has now come to a head, right? The reason he kept his identity secret was to protect largely these two ladies here. And almost immediately at the end of the Civil War, they're attacked. And Aunt May's not doing well. And Peter, you see him at his angriest, you see him at his most desperate and his most violent. And he learns that Kingpin was behind the assassination attempt on Aunt May. Aunt May's in the hospital. They can't say who she is because they'll find out that, Peter is unregistered and he's out there. So they book her under a fake name, but they also don't have a lot of money. Mary Jane's a struggling actress. Peter is takes photographs for the paper and is working at a high school. So their insurance is not going to be enough to save May's life. So Peter dons the black costume again because he says roughly that it matches his mood essentially and sends the message that he's not messing around. So he goes after the killer and, like I said, learns that Kingpin was behind it. So in this absolutely amazing issue, Peter goes to the prison where Wilson Fisk is and confronts him. And they have this absolutely amazing fight. And Peter just beats the shit out of Kingpin in front of all these prisoners and really just proves a point. And Peter's ready to kill him. Peter's really ready to, go against everything he's ever believed in and kill Kingpin. But at the last second, he changes his mind and says, "You'll live as long as Aunt May lives." And Aunt May is not doing very well. So at the end of this story, he also kind of approaches Tony Stark and, says, "Hey, this is your fault. They have this amazing battle and you need to help." And kind of uncharacteristically, Tony says, "No, I can't be seen helping you. You're unregistered. That would sacrifice everything we've worked for." But he eventually sends Jarvis with a check to at least help prolong Aunt May's life or keep her more comfortable as she might die. So then we get into this story called One More Day, and I won't talk about any of the controversy here. I'll talk about this after in my recap. I'll just kind of run you through it. One thing I will say, this is the last 4 issues of JMS's run, so very sad there, but we get Joe Quesada art, and I am a sucker for Joe Quesada artwork. I absolutely love it. If an omnibus comes out and one of the covers is Quesada, I'm getting the Quesada one. But his art is kind of ugly at times, like just the way he draws people's faces and his line work. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It just kind of has this, I don't know, realistic kind of tone to it. But you see Peter again at his most desperate. Aunt May's on her deathbed and does not know how to save her life. And this is, like I said, this is where he approaches Tony Stark, Iron Man, and says, "You need to help." They have their little battle. And Peter goes everywhere and does everything that he knows how to attempt to save Aunt May. He goes to Stephen Strange, Doctor Strange, and says, "Is there anything that the magic of the mystic arts could do to save her?" And unfortunately, there's not. And here's just an awesome example of why I love Quesada's artwork. His Spider-Man is just really cool. I like the line work. I like the muscles. But this web is so intricate and so cool. Absolutely love Quesada's art. The covers were really cool for this run too. But once he realizes that even Doctor Strange can't do anything to help Aunt May in her current state and that she's most likely going to die, he's met by this little girl. And he doesn't know who she is, but she's kind of acting funny. She's walking down this alley. She's saying things to Peter that kind of confuse him, but also he's concerned that this little girl's out at night, and he chases her down. And as he's having this conversation, the girl disappears. Then he meets this guy, and it's kind of philosophical type stuff, talking about what's about to happen to Peter. And then he meets this woman who eventually will transform into, spoiler alert, Mephisto. And Mephisto says, "I'm the only one that can save Aunt May." And Peter assumes, oh, I gotta sell my soul. I have to go live in hell to save her. And he says, no, I'm sick of sending heroes to hell because they don't suffer. They're content that they sacrificed their lives to save someone else. He's like, I want something more important. I want your love. I want your marriage. And again, I'm not going to get into the controversy around this. We'll talk about it after the fact. But Peter and Mary Jane eventually agree to Mephisto. We'll give you our marriage to save Aunt May's life. And that's exactly what happens. And, the next day, Peter wakes up and his life is quite a bit different. Neither him nor Mary Jane know about this. Mary Jane also asks Mephisto kind of at the end, you also have to kind of undo what happened in Civil War, make Peter and Spider-Man separate entities in the public eye. So Peter wakes up and, it retcons a few things. We see Harry Osborn back to life. And we kind of get a glimpse at maybe what happened. They kind of hint at, him and Mary Jane were going to get married and it just never happened. And then we get this cheers at the end of this party of Harry returning from England, to a brand new day. And then from here, Amazing Spider-Man, all of the secondary and tertiary titles are canceled, and Spider-Man becomes a 3 times monthly title. And for 2-3 years, it was called Brand New Day. Not my favorite Spider-Man stuff. I don't think they followed up on JMS very well, but that's for another day. A lot of extras in this book. We get Stan Lee talking about the decision that JMS and Quesada and the rest of the editors decided to do with the marriage. We get some JMS interviews, a lot of alternate art, cover art, scripts, the other sketchbook, this Spider-Man line-wide crossover that we talked about. A lot of cool extras in here. Some Quesada artwork, which again I think is, oh man, I just love. I don't know why, I just love Quesada's artwork. And like I said, back here somewhere, there's some interviews with JMS, and he kind of hints at, feelings around what they decided to do. There's interviews with Quesada. But that is it. That is JMS. After this, we get into Brand New Day. So as you know by now, the JMS run, I think, is the best Spider-Man run out there. I thought Straczynski really knew the characters of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, but it wasn't all about him. His entire run, this was a story about 3 people: Peter Parker, Aunt May, and Mary Jane Watson, or Mary Jane Parker, or, well, let you decide. But he really elevated the women in Peter's life and made them a central focus of this. Like I said, this story can be broken down into really 3 parts, right? It starts off, Peter is now an Avenger, right? And shortly after that, he's living in Tony Stark's tower with the rest of the Avengers. And it's really the first time Mary Jane gets to fully experience Peter's other life. I really liked the interplay of the other characters, especially Jarvis and Aunt May's relationship, the way Wolverine does some things to kind of elicit a response out of those two to favor Peter Parker. The second part is the Evolve or Die story, which was that line-wide Spider-Man crossover that lasted, I think, 12 issues. Overall, I really like that part of the book. I thought it was maybe a little fast-paced, or maybe some of the other writers didn't really understand what JMS wanted to do with this. I thought they kind of lacked a little bit in the return of Moreland, right? We saw Moreland in I think the first part of JMS's run, this vampire-esque character who's super powerful and is kind of related to that spider totem ideology that JMS was running with, which I really loved. And then we get, I lied. I said 3 parts. It's 4 parts. The next part would be the Civil War stuff, which is fantastic stuff, huge implications to Peter Parker going forward, and a lot of new things happen to Peter in that arc. And then we get the follow-up or the fallout of Civil War. So if you haven't read Civil War, I encourage you to do that. because the stories Back in Black and One More Day are two separate stories, but really it's just one story, and it's the immediate fallout of Peter's decisions during the Civil War. And I think Back in Black is some of the best Spider-Man we've ever had. This is Peter at his most desperate, at his angriest, and we soon to see his probably most powerful moments as he approaches Wilson Fisk in prison. And then One More Day, which a lot of people, in fact, I think most people have a lot of heartache about. I don't. I thought it was not a perfect story by any means. I think they could have done things slightly a different way, or they could have not done that at all. It would have been a great exit point for Aunt May, and could have kind of driven the character Peter Parker even further into the future, having lost Ben and then now Aunt May. But they chose to do something different. And, my defense of it is really Mary Jane was actually kind of the one that decided to do what they did, that kind of erased that marriage or ended that relationship. So it was really Mary Jane deciding to be the hero. Peter kind of wrestled with it, but went along with it. And if you think about it, Peter Parker's the ultimate Marvel hero. And when he's faced with this unfathomable decision to save a life, or do the selfish thing, I thought, which was just let Aunt May die and save his marriage, he decides to do the selfless thing along with Mary Jane and end the marriage, give that love to Mephisto, and save Aunt May's life. So again, is it perfect? No, absolutely not. I think they could have done things differently. There was obviously some editorial mandates in there that JMS wasn't fond of, and that's not new. That happens quite a bit in comic book history. But I liked it. I liked that what it did to Peter. I don't think going forward, I don't think the Brand New Day stuff was very good. It's not my favorite Spider-Man at all. I don't think they acted upon it very well, and they've never really resolved it. But yeah, they even if you read the JMS interviews and his ideas of what he wanted to do, because One More Day was planned a couple years in advance, or talked about a couple years in advance. But when that was given to JMS as a kind of a writing task, he had other ideas. And if you read the extras in this book, I don't really love his ideas either. So it's not a perfect story, but I don't think it's as bad or as terrible as Spider-Man fans will make it out to be. Peter chooses to be the hero, making the selfless act. But overall, this run is absolutely phenomenal. I wish JMS wrote Peter for another 6 years. He really knew the character of Peter Parker. He wrote his dialogue so well. He understood the other people in Peter's life and the heroes he interacted with. Specifically, when Peter joins the Avengers, I thought JMS wrote Iron Man really well. I thought he wrote Wolverine really well. I think he wrote Captain America, Steve Rogers, really well. In fact, I was pretty disappointed when his very recent Captain America run didn't last that long. I've got the trade paperback. I don't know if there was a second one. I don't know how long that went, but I thought he wrote him really well. And there's that moment in there where Captain America says, if you think something's right, it's your job to plant yourself like a tree. And when the rest of the world and the media and politicians tell you to move, you stand still and you stand up for your morals. I absolutely love that. That belongs on my wall somewhere. I think overall my favorite thing that JMS did was he wrote excellent Spider-Man stories, and he rarely relied on known villains. I think in the first book we saw Doc Ock for a couple issues, and then in this book we see Wilson Fisk for a couple issues, but largely JMS brings new concepts, new ideas, new villains into Peter Parker's life and tells amazing stories. This is an all-time great. I think everyone should read this. I hope it gets reprinted for you all here really soon. But let me know down in the comments what you think of this run, and let me know if you disagree, and I think a lot of you will, with my take on One More Day. As a matter of fact, I've not met a lot of people who share my feelings on the matter, but I'd love to know yours. So let us know down in the comments. If you're liking the videos that we're putting out, Brian and I and Steven, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to earn your subscription so you can see the content that we're putting out. Otherwise, have a great day. We'll see you on the next video.
If you're looking for great deals on collected edition comics or manga, we recommend shopping at panelboundcomics.com. They offer free shipping on orders over $30, plus bundled discounts to help you save even more. And if you're shopping from Europe or the UK, comicsbugle.com offers free EU shipping and a rewards program for regular buyers. Don't forget to use our discount codes at checkout.